Hello, and welcome to my Flooded Valley Guide with Pat and 100% Uptime Super Maelstrom. Before we get started, I will openly admit that this is not the safest guide, and you shouldn't use it if you're not comfortable with improvising ability timings. So, let's get started with the normal Flooded Valley start, where you place a sub right here. I can't really explain the visual indicators, but just use the range to help figure out the placement. And for most cases, unless you did a really good sub placement, you're going to have to place another sub mid-round to catch some leaks. If you got both sub placements right, you should survive until after round 10. So, you can actually place Pat in the middle of round 10, but it really doesn't matter, because we're getting Energizer later. So, at some point before round 11, place Pat as bottom left as possible in the corner next to your sub. At some point before round 14, upgrade your bottom sub to a 101. And for round 15, we have our first ability use of many. Once you see a pink coming from the top, use Pat's ability. You do need this one to beat the round. Before 18, upgrade your sub to Airburst. And at some point before 21, but you can do it before 20, get your sub to Intel. On 21, feel free to use Pat's ability, but it's not needed. And then before 22, place a boat as bottom left as possible into this corner, right over here. This guy isn't needed for now, but just prevents some RNG. You can also use Pat's ability for 23, but it's not needed. For 24, buy Submergent Support on your sub, and submerge it for exclusively the camo, and once Pat has popped the camo, unsubmerge it. Or just once it gets decamoed. At some point before 28, upgrade your boat to a 020 hotshot. On 28, feel free to use Pat's RNG trash prevention ability. It just happens sometimes that you might need to use it, so just be ready to use it. Also, feel free to use it on 31. You don't need to, but it can prevent some possible RNG trash from happening, because I guess it could theoretically happen maybe. 32 is AFK. And that makes sense actually, 32 is a pretty free round. For 33, submerge your sub and get Plutonium Reactor as soon as possible. This guy will be our decamo for basically the entire game, and it's kind of funny. Over the next few rounds, you're also going to upgrade your boat to a destroyer. So, yeah, get started on that. I'd recommend getting it as soon as possible during 37, but I'm not sure you need to. Just get it before 38. '40 is pretty simple. Just use Pat's ability when your destroyer starts attacking. '43 is also pretty simple. Just use Pat's ability when the ceramics start to approach your destroyer. And then, get aircraft carrier, I mean RNG trash. Because this tower is named RNG trash, there might be slight RNG on rounds like 50, 52, 54, and possibly even 55 for no apparent reason. It can happen, but on any other rounds except those, there shouldn't be any. So, 52 is pretty easy. When you see a Moab coming from the bottom, just use Pat's ability. There might be even more RNG trash here, even though I don't think there is. Just use Pat's ability, and you should be fine. 53 should be RNG free, so hopefully you don't have to worry about that. But 54 is definitely not RNG free. About a second after the bottom Moab has come onto the screen, you want to use Pat's ability. I used it a bit too late here, and it got quite close as you can see, and I almost died on 55 because of it, but you'll see in a bit. Yeah, 55 is pretty simple. Just use Pat's ability off cooldown on the final wave. It's very important that you do, because if you don't, there's a good shot you just straight up die. 56 should not have any RNG, which is nice, because aircraft carrier is garbage. And then, for 57, just to be safe, I'd use Pat's ability off cooldown as well, and then get carrier flagship once you can afford it. This tower also has a little bit of RNG, but less because it actually does damage, unlike aircraft carrier. You're going to place an Ice Monkey on the top platform of the carrier flagship as bottom right as possible, and then you're going to upgrade it to a 042 Snowstorm over the next few rounds. Personally, I buy it as soon as possible so I can have the cooldown up for 63, because you do need it for then. So, yeah. Just get it before 62. And then, before 63, you're also going to want to place a village right over here to give everything slightly increased range, as if that's going to help at all. For 63, abilities are pretty easy. Use a Snowstorm on the first wave, a Roar on the second wave, and another Snowstorm for the third wave. Pretty easy. After 63, upgrade your village to a 202, and over the next few rounds, you're going to be placing a tack shooter on the carrier flagship's other platform, as bottom right as possible into it though, and you're going to upgrade it to a 042 Maelstrom with even more tacks. Feel free to use the ability whenever you'd like, before 74. And speaking of 74, we're AFK until the end of it, so see you then. Because 75 is kinda mid, honestly, we gotta use some abilities on it. On the first group of 2 BFBs that comes down from the bottom, you're gonna want to use a Maelstrom, just at some point there. Probably even earlier. And feel free to use a Snowstorm if you'd like on the insides of some top BFBs. Before 76, get a Super Maelstrom and use the ability. This guy will absolutely carry our run for a while. And you'll upgrade your village to primary training as well, and now we're going to save up until Energizer. But the save up until Energizer does actually require a few abilities. Mostly just being using a Super Maelstrom whenever you feel like it. The 2 times that you do need Super Maelstroms are on the 2 waves of 78, so use it then. Even though these are the only 2 really required uses, I would recommend using it just whenever you feel like you need to. Like if you're about to get overrun by Moabs or to clean up the ZOMG insides, just whenever you'd like. I would recommend using the Super Maelstroms when I do though, like on the insides of round 80, but that's really it. other times it isn't needed. But I would personally just use it whenever you feel like it. I'd use it a lot. It helps. Anyways, if you managed to make it through me saying that unintelligible mess a few seconds ago, ignore that and just use Super Maelstrom whenever you'd feel like it. And also get Energizer before 85. Very important. And now you're going to get primary mentoring and continue using those Super Maelstroms. They're very good. Like, very, very good. Super Maelstrom goes kinda crazy after the buff. At some point soon, but preferably now, place a glue gunner right over here and upgrade it to a 013 Moab glue set to strong. This guy is very important for the run functioning. And also, at some point before 90, upgrade your top sub from the early game to a 301 decamo. For 87, a few seconds after the first ZOMG pops, use Pat and a Super Maelstrom. When I say Pat, I mean his level 3 Roar ability, because it's his only really useful one right now. You're also going to place a ninja in discount range, doesn't really matter where, just in discount range. And you're going to upgrade it to Bloons Sabotage once you have the money. Also, that was a Panic Snowstorm. If you have better Maelstroms, or you decide to use a Pat ability there, you won't have to. For round 90, you do 100% need to use a Maelstrom. If you don't, you'll for sure die, and you wouldn't want to do that. Continue to use Maelstroms whenever you feel like it. I'd recommend using them at similar times to me, like on the BFB wave of 91, but you can do that. Or just do whatever. Get that ninja to Sabo, and feel free to use it on 92. You definitely don't have to, and you could just use more Maelstroms instead, but, you know, you have so many abilities to work with, why not use most of them? Just don't use Pat's level 10 ability, it actually actively hurts you here, so, yeah. For round 93, save a Super Maelstrom and a Sabo for the DDTs. If you don't use both, there's a chance you die, and you really would not want to die right now, would you? For 94, just use some Maelstroms, you know? Use Maelstroms. Also, Sabo off cooldown. I guess that helps. And then, once stuff starts to reach the middle, a bunch of ZOMGs start to approach the middle, use a Snowstorm, Super Maelstrom, and even Pat's ability if you'd like. '95 actually is kind of important the way you do it. Once DDTs come out, use Pat and Super Maelstrom, and once the Super Maelstrom cooldown reaches about 50%, use a Sabo. For 96, you're going to want to use a Super Maelstrom for each of the waves of fortified Moabs. Basically, just spam it off cooldown. Also, use Sabo off cooldown, because that helps. And get primary expertise as soon as possible, and now, from now until the end of the run, you don't have to, but you can use Super Maelstrom just permanently off cooldown, because NK let that happen for some reason. For 97, you actually get level 20 Pat. So, it does nothing this run, but yeah. Use the second ability on the fortified ZOMG that comes from the bottom, and continue spamming Maelstroms. You can also use it for the one on the top, but sometimes you might not be able to, and that's okay. Even though you have Perma-Smail, you don't have to use it. For 98, I would only recommend using a Super Maelstrom once the bottom ZOMGs start to turn up, and then about when it reaches half cooldown, activate Pat's ability, and then just use it off cooldown from now until the end of the run, basically. This should absolutely destroy it, and you can even throw in a snowstorm if you'd like. 99 is pretty easy. Just use a Sabo, and a Super Maelstrom once the DDTs show up. And then before round 100, place a sub right over here, and upgrade it to a first strike. Continue spamming Super Maelstroms. You're also going to want to use Pat's first ability once the bad starts to turn left. This is where it is optimal for Super Maelstrom damage. And then, once the bad looks like it's about to exit the screen, use a first strike. Boom. Good job. You should now have your Flooded Valley Black Border with one of the coolest strategies I could think of. I hope this guide helped you out. Have a nice rest of your day. Goodbye. I'm still working on easiest Sanctuary and easiest Dark Dungeons, but those might take a bit.